She was fired for bringing her son to work until her new boss walked in and said, "I was that kid once." The morning started like any other. Gray sky, lukewarm coffee, and Rachel Miller rushing out the door with one hand holding her son's backpack and the other clutching a worn-out lunchbox. Her old car refused to start again, so she and Ethan ended up walking 3 blocks to catch the bus. She was late, again, and in her world, being late even once more meant risking everything. Before we continue, give a thumbs up, and please tell us where in the world are you watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel. Rachel worked as a cleaner in a corporate building downtown. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid for rent and Ethan's inhaler refills. Her supervisor, Mr. Collins, was the kind of man who measured worth by how spotless the floor shined. He had zero empathy and a clock instead of a heart. When Rachel rushed into the lobby that morning, out of breath and apologizing, he gave her that look, the one that made her chest tighten every single time. "Late again, Miller?" He barked loud enough for the receptionist to glance up. Rachel mumbled an apology and started scrubbing the floor before he could say more. But barely 2 hours into her shift, she got a text that froze her. "Mom, I can't breathe." Ethan was with Mrs. Jenkins, their elderly neighbor who watched him while Rachel worked, and his asthma had flared up bad. Her hands trembled as she called Mrs. Jenkins, hearing the panic on the other end. "You should take him to the ER now." Rachel grabbed her coat and rushed to Colin's office. "Sir, my son's having an asthma attack. I need to go," she pleaded. Collins didn't even look up from his computer. "If you walk out now, don't bother coming back," he said coldly. For a second, she stood frozen, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it. Then she turned, whispering, "He's my son," and ran out of the building. She didn't see the tall man sitting in the corner office near the hallway window, Daniel Grant, who had watched the whole thing unfold silently. Rachel spent the next few hours in the hospital, sitting beside her unconscious son's bed, his small hand wrapped in hers. When Ethan finally woke up, she smiled through tears, pretending everything was fine. But deep down, she knew she had just lost her only source of income. That night, back in their tiny apartment, she looked at the eviction notice on the counter and whispered, "We'll be okay, baby." "Mommy's got you." Her voice cracked, but she meant every word. What she didn't know was that the stranger who had watched her leave earlier that day would soon change her life forever. Rain poured that night like the sky had taken pity on Rachel. She sat by the window with a cup of instant coffee gone cold, watching the city lights blur through raindrops. Ethan was asleep on the couch, his breathing finally steady. She couldn't stop thinking about how fast her world had crumbled. One missed shift, one heartless boss, and now unemployment. She grabbed her phone and scrolled through job listings, but every option felt like a door slammed shut. Her stomach twisted as she whispered to herself, "How do I start over again?" Meanwhile, across town, in a penthouse overlooking the same city she struggled in, Daniel Grant leaned back in his leather chair, replaying the moment he saw Rachel rush out of the building. He wasn't the type to interfere in other people's business, but something about her face, the desperation, the fear, hit him harder than he expected. Maybe because years ago he'd been that kid, the one whose single mother had fought tooth and nail to keep a roof over their heads. Daniel wasn't just any man. He was the new CEO of Grant and Wells Enterprises, the company Rachel cleaned for. He'd taken over a month ago after the board begged him to return from a long hiatus. On paper, he was the definition of success. Young, driven, millionaire, and feared in the corporate world. But inside, there was a void he couldn't fill. Success had given him wealth, but not peace. As the rain tapped against his window, Daniel opened the company's staff database and found Rachel's file. Age 29, single mother, 2 years on the cleaning staff. He stared at the terminated tag next to her name, a muscle in his jaw twitching. "Unbelievable," he muttered. The next morning, he made a call that would start a chain reaction. When Rachel woke up, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Ms. Miller," a voice said, "this is Grant and Wells Human Resources. Mr. Daniel Grant would like to see you at the corporate office this afternoon." Her heart almost stopped. She thought it had to be a cruel joke. "Didn't they fire me?" she asked, her voice breaking slightly. "We're aware," the voice replied. "Mr. Grant wants to discuss something personally." Rachel didn't have a clue what this meant, but she couldn't ignore it. She spent the next hour patching her worn blazer, putting her hair up, and telling Ethan she'd be right back. "Wish me luck, kiddo," she said with a faint smile. As she stepped into the tall glass building, everything felt different. The front desk receptionist smiled this time instead of frowning. She was escorted to the top floor, her palms sweaty. When the elevator doors opened, Daniel stood near the window, hands in his pockets, city skyline behind him like something out of a movie. "Ms. Miller," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Please sit." Rachel hesitated, then slowly sat across from him, unsure if she was about to be scolded or offered a miracle. Daniel studied her face quietly before saying, "You don't remember me, do you?" She blinked, confused. I don't think so." He gave a small, almost nostalgic smile. "That's okay. You wouldn't. But years ago, you and your mother helped a scared kid who couldn't afford lunch at your diner." "That kid was me," Rachel froze. Her mind raced, flashes of a little boy with messy hair and bright eyes appearing from years ago. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. And that's when Daniel leaned forward slightly and said, "I think it's time I return the favor." "Return the favor?" Rachel repeated, her voice trembling slightly as she tried to make sense of his words. The air in the room felt thick, and she could practically hear her heartbeat echoing in her ears. Daniel nodded slowly, his gaze calm but serious. "Yes," he said. "I remember what your mom did for me when I was a kid. She fed me when we could barely afford food. I never forgot her kindness." "Or yours." Rachel blinked, unsure whether to laugh or cry. "Mr. Grant, that was years ago. You don't owe me anything." He tilted his head slightly, that confident CEO composure never slipping. "Maybe not, but I owe the world to people like you," he replied. "And if you'll let me, I'd like to offer you a job. Not cleaning floors this time, something that actually fits your potential." Rachel froze. Her throat tightened as she tried to find words. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," Daniel said, walking around the desk and leaning against the edge casually. "I need a personal assistant. It's long hours, sure, but it pays 6 times what you made before. You'll have weekends off, benefits, and—" She interrupted softly, shaking her head. "Mr. Grant, I can't just take a handout." "It's not a handout," he said firmly. "It's an opportunity." For a long second, neither of them spoke. The room was filled with that strange emotional silence that happens right before someone's life changes. Rachel looked down, clutching her hands in her lap. "I don't even know if I can do something like that," she whispered. Daniel smiled faintly. "You raised a kid on your own while working double shifts and still kept your dignity. Trust me, you're more capable than half the people in this building." Something in his tone disarmed her, the mix of authority and sincerity. It wasn't pity, it was respect. And that, more than anything, made her chest ache. She finally looked up and met his eyes. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll try." A slow smile tugged at the corner of Daniel's mouth. "Good. Start Monday. My assistant will email you the details." When Rachel left the building, her mind was spinning. Part of her wanted to jump with joy, but another part was terrified. What if she wasn't good enough? What if this was just a rich man's way of easing his conscience? That night, she tucked Ethan into bed and sat at the edge of her couch, staring at the ceiling. "What if I mess this up?" she whispered to herself. Ethan stirred a little and mumbled, half asleep, "You won't, Mom." "You never do." His words hit her harder than she expected. Maybe she'd been doubting herself for too long. Maybe this was her shot. By Monday morning, Rachel stood in front of the mirror, wearing the only blazer she owned. Her hair was neatly tied back, her nerves barely holding together. When she walked into Daniel's office, she found him already there. No suit jacket today, just rolled up sleeves and that same calm focus. "Morning, Ms. Miller," he said with a grin. "Welcome to the circus." Rachel laughed nervously. "You mean the office?" "Same thing," Daniel said. Over the next few days, Rachel started to see a side of Daniel no one else did. Behind the polished image of the CEO was a man who worked late, skipped lunches, and always took time to listen to people, especially her. And though she tried to stay professional, She couldn't ignore the way he looked at her sometimes, as if seeing someone he'd been searching for all along. What neither of them knew, though, was that something, or rather someone, from Rachel's past was about to walk back into her life and change everything again. It started as a normal Tuesday morning. The office was buzzing, phones were ringing, and Rachel was halfway through typing an email when a familiar voice, one she thought she'd never hear again, cut through the noise like glass shattering. Rachel? Rachel Miller? Her fingers froze on the keyboard. She turned slowly, her stomach tightening. Standing in the doorway of Daniel's office was Tom, Ethan's father, the man who'd walked out years ago without a word, leaving her to raise their son alone. Tom looked different. Expensive suit, slicked back hair, the kind of fake confidence that came from money he probably didn't earn honestly. "Wow," he said with a smirk. "You look upgraded." Rachel's breath caught, but she quickly stood up, keeping her voice steady. "What are you doing here, Tom?" Before he could answer, Daniel stepped out of his office. His calm, authoritative tone filled the space instantly. "Is there a problem here?" Tom turned, sizing him up like a challenger. "You must be the boss." "I'm here for business, but—" He chuckled darkly. "Didn't realize my ex was your assistant." Small world, Daniel's expression didn't change, but Rachel could tell his jaw had tightened. "If you're here for business," he said smoothly, "then maybe you should stick to business." For a second, silence hung heavy between them, and Rachel's chest felt tight. Tom's smirk faded as Daniel stepped closer, not threateningly, just enough to make his presence clear. Tom finally turned toward her. "We need to talk," he said under his breath. "It's about Ethan." Her heart dropped. "What about him?" But Tom didn't answer. He just walked out, leaving that sentence hanging like a storm cloud. That night, Rachel couldn't sleep. She sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone, trying not to overthink when a message popped up. From Tom. "We need to meet. I've changed. I want to be in my son's life again." Her hands trembled as she read it. Part of her wanted to delete it and move on, but another part, the tired, forgiving part, knew Ethan had always asked about his dad. "Does he ever think about me?" the boy would ask sometimes, his small voice breaking her heart. By morning, Rachel had made up her mind. She'd meet Tom, just once, to see what he wanted. But fate, as always, had its own timing. Daniel spotted her leaving early that day and followed her outside. "Everything okay?" he asked, concern in his tone. She hesitated. "Yeah, just personal stuff." He looked unconvinced. "Rachel, if something's bothering you, you can tell me." She sighed, finally meeting his eyes. "It's Ethan's dad. He's back. He says he wants to talk." Daniel's face hardened slightly, but his voice stayed calm. "Do you trust him?" "I don't know," she whispered, "but I have to find out." That evening, Rachel met Tom at a diner, the same one they used to go to when they were young and broke. He talked about second chances, about missing their son, about wanting to make things right. For a moment, he almost sounded sincere, but then came the twist. "I'm in trouble, Rachel," he confessed, leaning closer. "I need money." Just until things settled down, her stomach turned cold. "So that's what this is about?" "It's not like that," he insisted, but she could see it in his eyes. It was like that. Rachel stood up, voice shaking with anger. "You lost your chance a long time ago, Tom. Stay away from Ethan." As she stormed out of the diner, tears blurred her vision. She barely noticed the sleek black car parked across the street. Daniel's car. He had followed her, not to spy, but to make sure she was safe. When she got home, she found a message waiting for her. From Daniel. "You don't have to fight every battle alone anymore." Rachel sat there in silence, clutching her phone as her heart slowly began to steady. For the first time in years, she felt something she hadn't let herself feel in a long time. Hope. But what she didn't know yet was that Daniel's past carried its own shadows, and one of them was about to collide with hers in a way neither of them expected. It was one of those mornings where everything seemed fine on the surface, but something felt off underneath. Rachel walked into work early, a hot cup of coffee in her hand, hoping to lose herself in routine. But when she passed Daniel's office, she noticed the door was slightly open, and his voice, low, tense, was coming from inside. She hesitated, not meaning to eavesdrop, But one line stopped her cold. "I told you to keep that file buried," Daniel said sharply into the phone. "If it gets out that I was part of that foundation back then, everything I've built will fall apart." Her stomach dropped. That foundation? The same one Tom had mentioned last night? The one he claimed owed him money? Suddenly the dots connected in her mind. Tom's debt, the shady business partners, Daniel's guarded past. She knocked softly. "Daniel." He froze, eyes flicking up, guilt flashing across his face before he could hide it. "Rachel, you're early." "Who were you talking to?" she asked quietly. "And what foundation?" He sighed, closing his laptop like he was trying to shut the past away. "It's complicated. Try me," she said. Her tone wasn't angry, just tired. Daniel walked to the window, his shoulders tense. "Before I became CEO, I worked for a nonprofit. At least, that's what I thought it was. They claimed they were helping veterans rebuild their lives. But behind the curtain, the people funding it were laundering money. When I found out, I blew the whistle and left everything behind. I lost my career, my reputation, everything. That's why I started over, built this company from scratch. But now," he paused, voice cracking slightly, "those people are coming back to clean up their mess." Rachel's heart ached. "So Tom, he's involved in this?" Daniel nodded. "He used to work for them. That's probably why he came back, to find leverage." She took a deep breath. "And you didn't tell me because I didn't want you or Ethan caught in it," he said softly. "You've already been through enough." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Rachel stepped closer and placed her hand on his arm. "You don't have to keep carrying this alone, Daniel." Something in him broke at those words. He turned toward her, his usual composure gone. "Rachel, I don't just care about you. I care about Ethan too. You both remind me of what I was fighting for all along." Her heart skipped. Daniel. But before either of them could say another word, the office door burst open. Security stormed in, followed by Tom, smirking, holding up a folder. "Guess who's got a deal for you, boss man?" "Tom, don't," Rachel started, but Tom waved her off. "Relax. I'm just cashing in on what I'm owed," he sneered. "Either you pay up, Daniel, or I tell every investor about your dirty little secret." Daniel's voice was steady, but his eyes were cold. "You won't do that. Because if you do, you'll go down with me." Tom hesitated, realizing too late that he wasn't the one in control anymore. Daniel signaled security, and in seconds Tom was escorted out, yelling threats that faded down the hallway. After the chaos, Rachel turned back to Daniel. "So, that's it? It's over?" He gave a weary smile. "Almost. I still have to face the board and tell them the truth." "Won't that destroy everything?" she asked softly. He met her gaze. "Maybe. But I'm done hiding. I want to build something real, from the ground up. With people I can trust." Rachel's eyes softened. "Then you're not doing it alone." Weeks later, Daniel stood on a stage at a company conference, openly telling his story, his mistakes, his lessons, his redemption. The audience didn't turn against him. Instead, they applauded. Transparency had become his strength. In the crowd, Rachel and Ethan stood together, smiling proudly. When Daniel stepped off the stage, Ethan ran to him and wrapped his small arms around his legs. "Mom says you're brave," the boy said with a grin. Daniel laughed, crouching down to hug him back. "Your mom's the brave one, kid." And as he looked up at Rachel, her eyes warm, her smile soft, he realized that for the first time in his life, he wasn't fighting to prove himself anymore. He was fighting for something, for them. That was the day Daniel understood. Sometimes the people who walk into your messiest moments don't come to save you. They come to remind you that you still deserve to start over. If this story touched your heart, make sure to thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another story that stirs the soul. And before you leave, click on one of the videos on your screen, because every story we share holds another moment that might change the way you see love, family, and second chances.